Hello there. This is a retrospective on the world building of High Guardian Spice. It has been well over a year since the release date, and many people have had their say on this show. And for good reason. So now, I want to as well. Therefore, I'm going to be discussing the warrior training in High Guardian Spice and how poorly thought out it is. If you were to ask me, who has the more reasonable chance of winning in a sword fight, and the chosen contestants were Adora from She-Ra versus Rosemary from High Guardian Spice, it would be a no-brainer. Adora would stand a better chance at winning. And no, it's not because she's relying on plot armor or using main character syndrome to help her win. It's because Adora is carefully established to be a trained warrior since childhood, and it's implied at the start of her first episode. We see her training in the beginning of her season, despite being beaten a few times, but gradually she learns to stand her ground in any fierce confrontation she endures. While Rosemary, on the other hand, doesn't, and I personally don't see her lasting in any battle outside of High Guardian Academy. And the longer I think about it, the students who are being trained to be warriors, regardless if they use magic or physical weapons, don't stand a chance at surviving in any future battle. Except for one student in particular, but I'll expand upon that later. Therefore, let's look at the factors of why warrior training in High Guardian Spice is poorly thought out. Alright, so the first thing to examine is the battle tactics teacher. Foremost, he states that he is a martial arts master, and yet we never see him do any martial arts except in the opening credits. And if you really think about it, if he was genuinely a master and cared deeply about his students, then why on the first day of class is he not teaching the freshmen the basics of self-defense? And yet, we don't see this anywhere in the show. I honestly can't help but think that this man is setting up his students to fail for the very thing that they came to train for. I don't know about you, but this just sounds irresponsible. And I could not imagine the countless lawsuits this school would be facing for child endangerment. When being taught how to fight, it's best that you should be educated on the anatomy of fighting back. And no, I did not make this up. Because, in reality, if you cannot run away from your attacker immediately, then strike them in vulnerable areas such as the shins, knees, throat, groin, or eyes. It gives you the chance to subdue your attacker and run away to safety. Therefore, Hakon needs to teach all of his students that if you get trapped by an enemy and feel vulnerable, then the students should at least try to subdue them in vulnerable areas so that they can either escape to safety or formulate a plan to take down the enemy. And yet, none of these children are taught this. Instead, they are taught how to tame a baby dragon, despite living in an area where there are no dragons to be seen, except for underground, and that makes no sense, but I digress. And I am aware that they are taught the importance of having perfect stance when holding a sword, but let's be real, that's not really going to help Rose out in the long run, is it? Because if Rosemary relies way too much on her weapon and nothing else, I don't see her living to see her 16th birthday. My keen concern with these warriors is the fact that they rely way too frequently on their weapons to get them out of trouble. And that's not how a good warrior should be depicted as. But it's not the fault of the students. The faculty is to blame. They don't properly discipline their students in the basics of anything. Therefore, the students are set up to fail. Could you imagine the countless furious letters this school must get every semester? Because little Timmy and Samantha dreamed about being badass warriors only to be burnt to a crisp by a baby dragon on the first day? I don't know about you, I wouldn't send my kids there if the tuition was free, because that is how Rose could easily be taken down. I'm asking you, What do you think Rosemary would do if Flowering Thorn was knocked out of her hands in the middle of a battle? Well, probably nothing, because let's face it, she would have her friends step in to do the fighting, while Deus Ex Machina is probably handed to her. In fact, if she was alone with someone like Mandrake, he would realistically just stab her and the episode would be over. Do you want to know who I think are the best fighters that writers should take note from? Captain America, Black Widow, or Sokka from Avatar. Why? Because they are disciplined, educated, creative, and courageous. These three very rarely back out of a vicious fight, and they don't hesitate to use their environments if they find themselves in a pinch. They frequently study their targets and environments because they don't allow their limitations to define what they can do on the battlefield. They take charge when danger is thrust upon them, and they don't go anticipating trouble. That is how you craft a strong, independent warrior. The world of High Guardian Spice is loaded with selfish, negligent, and irresponsible characters. I could go on about how everyone in this universe is terrible and prove how, but let's be real, we would be here forever. Instead, I'll just kindly remind you how all the faculty are the worst types of teachers I have ever seen. And I was raised in a whole family that went on to become educators themselves, so I know what I'm talking about. These teachers don't start off with the basics of anything in their subjects. They don't give a proper assessment or just ask their students what they already know in order to determine an appropriate starting point for their academic journey. Yes, education is a journey that should never be limited and should be treated as a lifelong path. Our world and innovations are always changing. You should never always stick to what you just know. You have to intellectually challenge yourself and your students, or otherwise they won't go very far. In fact, you won't go very far. And the best example that I can come up with is medicine. Medicine is constantly changing, and it's getting better with each passing decade. For people who suffered from fatal diseases from 30 to 40 years ago, now have a chance to live out longer lives. And that's thanks to the countless scientists, doctors, nurses, and educators who have been dealing with impossible odds and have managed to push through. Cancer is no longer scary to talk about. AIDS is now treatable. Hope is stronger than ever. And isn't that what an educator or role model of any kind should inspire people to pursue? And the answer is yes. Yes, you should. You should push yourself to take everything that you were taught and push it to the limit. See if you can push forward and make new discoveries for a better tomorrow. And in the world of High Guardian Spice, I don't see that in any of the characters, which is not good for anyone watching. This is why any promising student at High Guardian Academy would desperately need a divine miracle to survive any task that's given to them. Their role models are nothing but self-serving and don't care about their students. They just exist to drink, gamble, and endanger children. So, in the beginning, I stated that there exists one student in the school that gives me hope of being the best of the bunch. Do you want to know who it is? You probably know. It's Amaryllis. And I agree that she is the best character in High Guardian Spice. Hands down, because she ends up going through an arc, and I guess learns to genuinely appreciate her friend Snapdragon. In fact, throughout the show, Amaryllis displays that she is unafraid to use both magic and physical weapons. In fact, she is the only one who puts on a brave face and has Snapdragon bravely help her save everyone in the school when Mandrake is leading out his poorly thought out siege. During that time, Amaryllis is calm, collective, resourceful, and puts the student's safety before her own. How did this girl become an ironic kick-ass hero. This is amazing. In fact, throughout the whole show, Amaryllis just proves that she's an ideal candidate to be a strong and honest hero. And I chalk that up as her having more depth than Rosemary, who only selfishly puts her mom on a pedestal and does not think about the needs of those around her. But even then, I think the writers missed an opportunity to push Rose through this potential arc. I personally don't mind if Rosemary started off as being a selfish and bratty warrior who only thought about herself and her emotional needs to find Lavender. As long as Rosemary learned that the world doesn't revolve around her and that there are wonderful places and people worth protecting, so that eventually she can push herself to see another day when her mom comes home and it will be in a world that is safe for everyone to live in. The warriors and their training in High Guardian Spice are awful. The educators are not properly trained and are ill-suited to be educators themselves. They fail miserably to give their students a sturdy environment for them to practice their knowledge and skills, causing the students to develop potential bad habits and learn that weapons and magic can just solve all your problems, which sets them up for failure. But this is the result of a wicked world where nothing but bad role models exist and there are not enough good ones. And the only good character who stands a chance of being the best warrior of the bunch is Amaryllis. If only the story was about her and Snapdragon learning to appreciate the world and themselves. But that is not what we ended up with. And maybe somewhere in a parallel universe, such a wonderful show exists. Anyways, that is all I have for you today. If you plan on becoming a kick-ass magical warrior, then I think you should take notes from Amaryllis or just go watch Captain America. I'll see you around.